Let it scroll forward.
Hi, how you doing?
All right, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. We did. Great, thank you.
Yeah, we went and saw the doc today.
Are you recording the
Yeah,
So are you going to upload it anywhere or
it's going on
what's that? Where?
to the Beekeepers Association.
Oh, okay, but will it be like open to public or what?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I don't want to, like keep it open because I have a lot of slides, illustrations that we have not published. I have not published.
You can talk to my wife. She's the one that's doing this.
Oh, okay.
She's the secretary. The one that's out there at the table. Carrie.
Oh yeah. I forgot what you did. Oh yeah. There you go. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, late yesterday. And put it. Yeah, didn't get all of it.
Didn't mean to create work.
Oh, no, you didn't.
You've already got. Luckily, we just got replaced those two.
Oh, yeah.
Replaced it. It's just two. They just need to glass. It's all I had laying around. I'm afraid to open. Keith will come up there and poke on that. She was beating.
It's really good though, Jay.
All right, good evening. Looks like it's a big crowd here tonight. I appreciate everyone coming out. We are going to get started right on time tonight because we have a packed schedule. I know you've been looking at the announcements, but I do want to quickly just correct. Let me turn to my second page.
Hey, Ron.
All right, the names on the NT notebooks to pick up was not correct, and it's probably my fault, but Carlos and Michael, if you're here, we have a notebook for you. Earl has those at the back. Jeff Waller, Jay, I think he just picked his up. Josh Embley, and Joe, and Audra Mitchie. Earl, the guy in the yellow shirt, has your notebooks if you're here tonight, so please pick those up before you leave. And there will be a form right inside the front cover for you to take a look at and leave with Earl before you take your notebook. Okay? All right, is Winford here? I don't see Winford, so he's going to talk to us in just a minute. But we're going to have a chance in a little while for you to ask a few questions about the upcoming Build Day that's coming up in June. So I'm going to put that off for just a little bit until Winford gets here. And we're gonna just move right on to the drawing for the door prizes.
Right, they're out there.
Okay, Jennifer Marie Grace will be doing the honors. Okay, then she'll take it out to you.
Yeah.
What was the number?
7668.
7668.
Yeah.
I had to find it for you.
Prize.
Don't get your prize.
All right,
I'll
we're
get
gonna
it
do
for
two
you.
more.
They're not going to deliver it?
Okay, next one is 7642.
7642. Yeah.
Okay, next number is 7649.
It's me.
7649. Oh, one of our brand new attendees.
It's
Just called 764. 765.
Okay, great. Right, so now I think we're gonna, Winfredus, are you here? I didn't see you. Okay, so we're gonna wait and go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna let Mel introduce our main speaker for this evening.
Yeah, are you how loud to talk?
I'm okay, I guess.
Okay, hopefully,
Yeah, I don't need it. I don't need it.
Don't need it, okay.
Doyle killed.
I just wanna make sure that, yeah, okay, just wanna make sure we're advancing, okay. You might have people might call like rock star. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Neil Joshi. He is an associate professor of entomology at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville. He holds a dual PhD degree in entomology and comparative and international education from the Pennsylvania State University and completed his postdoc training in entomology at the same institution. Dr. Joshi's research is focused on several critical areas, including pollinator health and ecology, pesticide toxicology and risk assessment, biodiversity and conservation, and the management of bees and other insect pollinators. He's also dedicated to developing ecologically based pest management strategies that reduce the use of chemical pesticides, promote biodiversity, and support the long-term health and sustainability of agricultural ecosystems. In recent years, Dr. Joshi's lab has documented several species of native pollinators in the state of Arkansas. Dr. Joshi is a passionate advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and strives to promote these values through his research, teaching, mentoring, and outreach activities. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Joshi. He's going to talk on risk of pesticides to honeybees and native bees in different landscapes and strategies for risk mitigation. Let's see, yeah, that'll probably help with.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk about, bee pesticide risk assessment and, threats to bees in different landscapes. Yeah.
It's weird, the first spot here, go. This one? What happened? Brian, help!
There you go.
Here you go.
That's mine.
That's his.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about pesticides, give you a little background about different types of pesticides, bees, pollination, and bee decline. I'm going to give you a little overview about species-specific pesticide exposure scenario as well. And Later, second part of my talk, I'm going to give you some results of some case studies that I have been involved in past several years. And then I will briefly go over different strategies that we can adopt for pesticide risk mitigation. Okay. So there are different types of pesticides. As you see on this slide, we can classify them based on their target, like algicides, going to control algae, fungicides for fungi, herbicides for weed control, insecticides for insects, miticides for mite control, molicicides for slugs, snails, nematicides for nematodes, rodenticides for rodent. So these are different, like classes of different types of pesticides that we commonly use to control pests. We can also classify them based on mode of action. So there are different types of categories when we classify them based on their mode of action. They could be broad spectrum, means when we apply them, they can kill a broad range of species. They could be contact poison, only when a target species is going to contact them, they are going to kill them. And then disinfectant, eradicant, disinfectant, used especially when disease is already spread to control pathogens. Germination inhibitor, those are weedicides mainly. And then there are other pesticides that are non-selective, similar to broad spectrum, but you can say very broad spectrum group of pesticides. Then there are nerve poison, protectants, repellents, systemic pesticides, and stomach poison. In commercial agriculture these days, what we see, most of insecticides that are used are systemic insecticides. And as well as there are other types of pesticides, like pyrethroids or glyphosates. They are also used. But systemic pesticides, mainly neonicotinoids, you might be familiar with some of those neonicotinoid insecticides that have been in news for their toxicity to bees and some other non-target species. Well, pesticides, what we see in the market, they are composed of two parts. One is active ingredient, another is other ingredients or inerts. So active ingredient is basically the chemical that's going to kill the target species. Okay, usually in pesticide bottle, it is a very small proportion, and the remaining is inert or inactive ingredient. What we see on the label, we see chemical name, chemical information related to active ingredient. We don't know what that 90% of chemicals are in that bottle. That's trade secret. Okay, so companies usually don't disclose that unless they are required by law. And in the market, what we see is basically formulation. So we might see only 1% active ingredient, 99% inert or inactive ingredient, or in some cases max like 7 to 8%, depending on chemical. So in the case of pesticide, label is the law. It's very important to read it before we use it. It has information on how to use it, and it tells us registered uses of that pesticide and the recommended doses, as well as compatibility of that pesticide chemical. And it has other information such as phytotoxicity and re-entry statement when we apply pesticide in agricultural field, when we can re-enter the field. And it has signal words, as you can see here, these are signal words. And it has precautionary misuse statement as well. So by law, we are required to use pesticide, as per the information given on the label of pesticide bottle. Okay, so when we look pesticide used by sector, if you look at this illustration, this infograph, most of the pesticide in the United States are used in agricultural sector, and then around 20% of total pesticide use is used for non-agricultural purpose. Worldwide, pesticides, like 40% are herbicide, and 33% insecticides, 10% fungicides, and 17% other. Okay, so others include, sulfur, oil, other insect repellent, and other chemicals that are used for pest management. Okay, so as you saw, in the previous slide, agriculture is basically, where all these pesticides are used. And in agriculture, many of our food crops, they need pollination. And bees are important pollinators. There are several species of bees that help in pollination. Honeybees are one of them. And there are over 20,000 well-documented species of bees that help in crop pollination worldwide. In North America, there are approximately 4,000 species of bees are documented. And as per an estimate, in 2010, these bees contributed about $29 billion in our farm income. And if we just look at honeybees, worldwide, honeybees contribute about $200 billion in terms of pollination services they provide. And approximately $17 billion in the United States. And the rest, 12 to $14 billion is provided by, other solitary bees and other species of bees. Okay. So here is an infographic showing pollinator dependency, by crops. As you can see, some high-value crops like, some fruit crops and nuts, like almonds, apples, they are highly dependent on bee pollination, insect pollination. And then there are other crops, they are also dependent on pollination by insects and other species. These fruit crops are blueberries, cranberries, and some other seed crops, like crops that are grown for seed business, are also dependent on pollinators. So in agricultural landscape, bees are exposed to different types of chemicals. Okay, and at the same time, they also interact with other environmental stressors. And all these, a combination of these environmental stressors cause decline in the population over a period of time in any given in a given area. So if you look at here, there are different environmental stressors that have been reported to cause bee decline. Some of them are, poor management, destruction of habitat, pathogens and diseases, and poor nutrition, pests, and other environmental factors, lack of floral food resources, and of course, agriculture chemicals. In the US, managed honeybees been surveyed for last several years, as you see on the slide, and there have been losses in honeybee colonies for various reasons during summer as well as winter seasons. And if we look at a recent survey of winter losses statewide, you can see here, many states, many states have over like 40%, over like 35% colony losses. Even in Arkansas, it's around like 44. Yes, it's 44% losses in 2-3 years back. So there are different factors that affect bee communities in agricultural landscape. So pests and pathogens, like pest management practices, like the type of chemicals, pesticide chemicals growers use, and availability of rural resources, nesting habitats, and agronomic practices. Over a period of time, these factors alone or in combination can decrease population of bees or increase population of bees in the landscape, depending on how they are interacting. And bees, for example, honeybees, can expose to pesticides in different ways. As you can see here, they can expose to chemicals while they are in hive, mainly the pesticide chemicals that are used to manage a different pests, miticides that are used to control different mites, and other pests. And most importantly, these honeybees, forager honeybees, they are exposed to different types of chemicals when they are out foraging, collecting pollen and nectar, and they can also get pesticide exposure from guttation water. That's basically when the systemic seeds are sown and they grow, and in the morning in the leaf we will see a small drop of water. And these bees, they while flying, they land and they collect that water. So that can also have pesticide residue. And there are several studies showing residue in nectar and pollen, and single dose of that residual chemical might not be lethal, but over a period of time, that dose can have some lethal impact. And they bring those pesticide residue back to hive, and then other life stages like larvae, most importantly, are also exposed to those pesticide chemicals. And then there are other types of bees, like ground nesting bees. Out of that 20,000 bee species, more than 70% bee species make their nest underground. They can expose to pesticide chemicals in different ways. When pesticides are applied in a landscape and due to rain, all the pesticide residue goes in soil, and these bees, they make their tunnel like 12 to 18 inches deep under the ground, and while digging they can expose to pesticide residue. And also, as you see, there are pollen stores. So there are pollen stores out there, and they are collecting pollen from agricultural landscape. Those pollen grains might also have some pesticide residue, and they are like newly hatched larvae can also be exposed to pesticides because of residue in pollen grains. And then there are other group of bees, tunnel nesting bees. You might have seen these bees. These are mason bees. They make their nest in pre-existing cavities, and they also collect pollen from flowers. Mainly this time of the year, if you go in any orchards, you will see a lot of these bees out there, orchard bees. And they collect pollen, and they also collect mud, and they make their nest in tunnel. And if soil is contaminated with pesticides, that can affect their developing larval states. And if pollen is contaminated with pesticides, that can also affect their newly hatched larva, which is going to eat that pollen. Okay, so in next few slides, I'm going to give you some examples of how agricultural pesticides how agricultural pesticides can be toxic to honeybees and mason bees. So in this case study, I'm going to give you example of some of commonly used pesticides like sales, which is cetamiprate, kind of neonicotinoid, then we have imidran, Provado, Warrior, dimethyl. These are commonly used pesticides in crops like fruit crops like apples and other tree fruits, as well as other cropping systems. And bees are important pollinators, including honeybees. And but in orchard system, we have other bees like mason bees. One of them is Japanese orchard bee, which is highly efficient. It was introduced in the United States back in 1970s by the USDA for fruit pollination. And in Japan, most of fruit growers, they deploy these bees for fruit, like pollination in their fruit crops instead of honeybees. Okay, so these bees are highly efficient. So we wanted to know the toxicity of some of these pesticides, commonly used pesticides. So as you see on this slide, x-axis is different types of pesticides, y-axis is lethal dose. That's ND50, that's the dose that kills 50% of pest population. If the dose is higher, means the compound is less toxic because we need a lot of like those to kill the pest population. So if you look at x-axis, some of the pesticides with showing really high dose to kill the pest population means they are less toxic compared to some of the pesticides like lambda-cyhalothrin, where LD50 value is very low. LD50, that's microgram per bee, it's very low, 0.3 in the case of honeybees and 0.91 in the case of Japanese orchard bee. Compared to a nearly systemic pesticide, neonicotinoid, which is acetamiprid, where lethal dose is 64.6 for honeybees and 5.2 for that mason bee. So this pesticide is less toxic compared to that pesticide. So here, take home message is there are several pesticides available, and as a grower, we should select the pesticides that are less toxic to non-target species like honeybees, orchard bees. And at the same time, we can get, good control of our pests in our crops, but we can also protect bees in the landscape. It's the same information, but just in the form of bar graph for honeybees. Here you can see it clearly how big the difference in terms of toxicity across these, different pesticides. Okay, so other common practice for controlling pests is mixing different chemicals together. So growers can save some, cost of production or the dollars that are used for the spray pesticide, running spray. And these days we can get a lot of pesticides that come in pre-mixed formulation. So the company providing 2 pesticides or 3 pesticides together in a formulation to growers or end users. So they don't have to mix that pesticides on their own. They are providing it. So, but it could pose higher threats to bees by additive effect. That's 1 + 1, 2 chemicals there. Could be synergistic, like more than more toxic than by just having just 2 pesticides. It can also reduce the toxicity, which is very less likely. And but such kind of mixtures can also cause interactions with other pathogens, or make bees and bee colonies or more stressful to other environmental stressors, and they can also affect immune system of bees. So we wanted to test how mixture of pesticides here, one systemic pesticide, acetamiprid, and another pesticide is a commonly used fungicide. How does it affect in terms of toxicity and toxicity to honeybees and orchard bees? So here you can see when we use acetamiprid alone, it was less toxic. And if you look at when it was mixed with that fungicide in proportion of 1 to 1, then it was, the toxicity increased. The lethal dose is very low. So it means it has some synergistic effect out there, and it increases toxicity of chemical to honeybees. And it is, kind of similar study, but with another systemic pesticide, imidacloprid, which is one of the commonly used, or I would say one of the most widely used systemic pesticides in the United States. It's imidacloprid, And we mix it with fungicide, and we got kind of mixed result out there. We didn't see like big differences in toxicity or no statistical difference in terms of toxicity. So next few slides, I'm going to show you about environmental weight risk assessment, like we call it high tier risk assessment, where we look for field residue. We apply pesticides, like growers apply pesticides, and pesticides end up, mainly systemic pesticides, they end up in pollen and nectar. And so we wanted to see how does it affect pollinator health, or in terms of just to determine their estimates and to see if those estimates of residue are toxic to bees or not. So here we sprayed systemic pesticides before bloom in apple orchard and collected pollen and nectar during bloom. And in second scenario, we sprayed pesticides a few weeks before harvest for late season pests and collected pollen and nectar next year during spring when the trees they start flowering, just to see if there is a carryover residual effect. And as you see here, some of these pesticides we tested. These are commonly used pesticides in apple orchards. And x-axis is showing those pesticides, y-axis is residue in ppm, parts per million. And as you can see, many of the systemic pesticides we found very low residue when collected, right after bloom. And nectar, as you can see here, it's showing pollen and nectar both. And nectar, we found very low quantity of these in parts per billion. Okay, and in pollen, the amount, the residual amount was higher. But again, these doses were, not enough to kill bees. Okay, so in scenario one, pesticide residue were very low. Single visit of flowers may not cause toxicity to bees. In the second scenario, when we sprayed pesticide late in the season and collected flowers next year in spring, and like nectar and pollen, we did not detect any pesticide residue. Okay, so fall sprays in, for example, crops like apple could be considered safe to bees that visit flower next year season. Okay, so in next few slides, I'm going to talk about toxicity of some ready-to-use garden pesticides to, orchard bees and leafcutter bees. Everyone likes gardening. Not many people, they spray pesticides, but in, like if we go to a store, we find a lot of, ready to spray pesticides and people they bring, and they spray them to control some pests. And squash bug, that's one of the most difficult pests, garden pests to control. At the same time, those flowers are listed by, a lot of bees because it produces a lot of pollen. And then there are other direct pesticide exposure when we do a lot of ornamental plants that are infested by different kind of pests. At the same time, they are also listed by bees. Okay, so homeowners, gardeners, they might just spray those ornamental plants, but after like 2 hours, bees are visiting those and getting that pesticide exposure. Then there are a few other, flower. As you can see here, a lot of pests out there. At the same time, bees also visit. Leafcutter bees, they like, cutting out leaves, and people might not be aware. They just spray pesticide, and that pesticide will end up in their nest out there. As you see, a very colorful nest in my backyard. Okay, so in other scenarios, gardeners, homeowners, they apply weedicides to control weeds and lawn. And many times we have ready to spray, ready to use like 2 different types of formulation. One is, we can connect hose and just spray. And, bees and other flower visiting insects can come in direct contact of, that pesticide application. And, might have some sublethal effect. And so, we are going to see how, some of these pesticides can affect these bees. So in the case of blue orchard bees, we collected the bee stock out there, and then we sorted them out, and then we transferred to spray chamber and spray through cases, as you can see here, and then we treated with different types of pesticides, as you see on this slide. These are commonly used garden pesticides: fungicide, neem oil, carbaryl, sulforaphane, and weedicide as well. So as you can see on this slide, x-axis is treatment, and the graphs are showing mortality as 24 and 48 hours. And if we look at mortality at 24 hours, many of these pesticides, especially insecticides, were highly toxic. Even we can see mortality. That's a C in the case of neem oil. Okay, and the same trend we recorded at 48 hours. In the case of leafcutter bees, we collected these bees from the nest, and we sorted out, and we treated them with different pesticides. And if we look at the result here, we found pretty much similar trend that we saw in the case of blue orchard bees. Many insecticides were highly toxic to bees compared to control. And in next few slides, I'm going to show you how we can, develop some strategies to mitigate pesticide risk to bees. So we can do it by selecting less toxic pesticides, modified pesticide programs to minimize pesticide exposure, and we can try to know environmental fate of pesticides, so that way we can select and modify pesticide application time. And we can establish floral resources and nesting habitats adjacent to agricultural landscape. So these bees, they get a lot of different types of food, and they still get some like immunity against very low dose of pesticide, or tolerance against low dose of pesticide. So pesticide selection matters, like I briefly mentioned in one of the slides of case studies. Here are different types of neonicotinoids, and as you can see on this slide, they differ in terms of their toxicity to the honeybees. Okay, so all these are systemic pesticides, and we have a choice like which one to choose. So we can select the one that are less toxic to bees, and then we can establish floral resources in agricultural landscape. Okay, we can provide different native flowering plants. We can establish them in adjacent to landscape, like we have a lot of open spaces, as you can see on this landscape. And these plantings, they can provide a buffer zone to minimize pesticide effect in honeybees and other native bees. Yeah, some of the flowering plants that can be used in these floral plantings could be early season flowering plants. As you can see on this slide, these are flowering plants recommended for Arkansas. These are some of the mid-season flowering plants, and they are very good in terms of the nutrients they provide to bees and food resources they provide to different kinds of flower-visiting insects. And here are mid to late season flowering plants, and some of these are, especially rosenweed, attracts a lot of bees. And then we have late season flowering plants. You might have seen different kinds of goldenrod, aster, sage. All they attract a lot of bees, and they are very good source of nutrient, not just honeybees, but also other native bees and other flower-visiting insects. And for native bees, we can also provide nest substrate. We can put tunnel boxes like wooden blocks drilled with different size of holes, and we can also provide those tubes adjacent to, and we can keep them adjacent to farm where they are not exposed to pesticide drainage. Okay. Hey, to summarize, several species of bees help in pollination of flowering plants. Bees are exposed to several environmental stresses, including agricultural pesticides. Toxicity and risk of pesticides vary from species to species. A combination of strategies such as selecting less toxic pesticides, modifying pesticide application timings, and establishing floral and nesting habitats can be used to mitigate pesticide risk. I would like to acknowledge different agencies and people helping my research program during the last several years. And thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, I'll be happy. Yes. That's a good question. So usually at the end of the season, growers apply pesticides to control, invasive species. They don't want to lose their crops, so they are very, very careful in terms of, like what to spray, when to spray, because they have, spent a lot of their time and resources throughout the season, and at the time of harvest, they don't want to lose. So, most of the time they will spray systemic insecticides, and always there, wherever systemic pesticides are sprayed, there are always concerns for their non-target toxicity. For example, toxicity to bees. And when they are applied in the late fall, they can they can control the target pest. But the next year, during bloom, their residue is, we did not find any residue of many of those things. So pretty much, they are safe to bees within that season.
You say something about 7 dust is commonly used in gardens here. 7 dust.
That's a good question. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's insecticide.